Virginia director. Kind of doing a little background. What is the Chesapeake Bay Commission? And how does it fit in with the Chesapeake Bay program? And then Kevin McLean coming and doing something very similar he did at Brent's event last October, where he talked about the Chesapeake Bay program, and I want him to do some basics on what is the Bay program and what is DEQ's role in that effort, and then where do we stand in terms of progress in the Rappahannock. Again, some basic stuff, and then Matt Wells is going to join us and just talk about the basics of what is cost share. There are some members who I don't even know if they know what cost share is, and I hope I'm pleasantly surprised and we learn otherwise. But I've been trying to reach out to the new members, and it's clear. The new delegate, Gary Higgins from Northern Fauquier and Loudon. He's a former member of the Loudon board, so he's got some working knowledge from that perspective. But Senator Russet Perry is a prosecutor by training and doesn't really have a grounding in water resources. So I just use those two as examples. And again, it's not being critical of anybody. It's just they're in a new environment. So with that, what I wanted to do was open it up to this group. I want to hear some suggestions of what we should be doing in beyond the meeting next week in June and in September, and to kind of walk that path that we need to walk. And I just like to hear any kind of suggestions people have. With that, let's go around, and that monologue by me gave time for some other people to join, and let's do some introductions. And I'm just going to call people out since I'm looking at the screen. John, you get to go first.
Sure. My name is John McCarthy. I'm Senior Advisor with the Piedmont Environmental Council.
Thank you, John. Brent.
Brent Hunt, Senior Director of Advocacy and Coastal Programs with Friends of the Rappahannock.
Sarah.
Also with the people.
Okay.
Are there two Sarahs?
There you go.
We missed the first few words.
Oh, there we go. All right. Sarah Parmalee, also with the Piedmont Environmental Council, covering Culpeper County land use issues.
Okay. And let's see, on the phone is Missy Neff.
Good morning, Missy Neff with Dominion Energy. I do environmental outreach for the company.
Thank you. Mike.
Hey guys, good morning. Mike Volpe with Open Road Renewables. We develop utility scale projects across the Commonwealth and have some active projects under development in the Rappahannock River Basin Basin area. Thank you.
Tommy. Retired Tommy Blackwell.
Good morning. Yeah, Tommy Blackwell, currently in between jobs, but here on the Rappahannock, and a recent new member of the Northern Neck Land Conservancy board. So, and also a friend of the Rappahannock.
Thank you, Tommy. John.
John Bateman, Assistant County Administrator, Economic Development Director, Lancaster County.
Yeah, congratulations on your new role.
Thank you very much, Sheldon.
Yeah. Kevin.
Yes, good morning. Kevin Nutt. I'm with AMT Morton Thomas Consulting Engineers, formerly a Rappahannock River Basin Technical Committee member and former City of Fredericksburg Environmental Programs Manager for the city. Thank you.
Welcome back. Harrison.
Thanks.
Harrison Previn with Culpeper County Planning and Zoning.
And Don McGowan has put in the chat that his mic is not working. He's with Piedmont Environmental Council. Ryan.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I'm on Mike's team at Open Road Renewables. I live in Albemarle County, so I manage all of our Virginia projects.
Very good. Thank you. I've got a couple other people on the list that I was expecting, but that's all right. We're going to proceed. Okay. So now we've introduced ourselves, and I opened the floor for topic suggestions for future commission meetings, and I'm just going to let y'all have at it, please. Go ahead, Brent.
One thing I'd like to see maybe would benefit is, I know there's been some previous discussion about utility scale solar, but perhaps a larger discussion on land use issues facing the Rappahannock in the watershed.
Say a little bit more about land use issues.
Data centers, utility scale solar, loss of tree canopy. I just think it's really, if we're honest, that it's maybe the most hot button topic in the Rappahannock watershed.
I would add to that impacts to agriculture and forestry industries.
From land use development.
From the conversion of land use.
I mean, I should be honest. Like, if we're being holistic, it's growth, it's residential housing. You know, it's not just those two. We just face a land use crunch from a variety of sectors. So it's probably not fair just to say utility scale solar and data centers. It's housing. It's all type of growth.
Brent, if I could add to that, I think that we are probably most in need of information about the land use impacts of data centers. In particular, we've had a lot of discussion about utility scale solar impacts, and residential impacts are nothing new, but data centers are something that are a nascent industry, at least in the wider Rappahannock Rapidan watershed, and one that I think that we could all benefit from having additional guidance and case studies, more information about.
And I guess we also have 206 coming at some point. We're going to have all the draft 206, so that could be something that gets discussed depending on the timing of when it's released. So.
All right, back to Sarah's comments on guidance. Where would be places that worthwhile guidance would come from?
Yeah, there are some counties and localities that have more experience with data centers, that have already adopted ordinances or require, use specific standards that I've not seen in the more rural areas yet. Loudoun County, Prince William County both have more use specific standards. Frederick, Maryland as well. There are also some other counties outside of Virginia as well that have adopted use specific standards and practices. Where else were we going about that? And of course, sorry, only 1 cup of coffee, but that's sort of the initial start. John, feel free to jump in. We could also look to some of the European standards, since most of these organizations are international, and potentially have stricter standards that they have to live by if they're going to be doing business in Europe or Asia or literally anywhere else.
Okay, thank you. All right, Brent, you mentioned 206 report. Who would be the best resource to be able to encapsulate that once it is in that form.
I don't know who that's gonna be, honestly, yet. Because we'll have to see when they put it
Yes,
out.
'cause I don't know either.
I don't know who the point person's gonna be.
All
I
right.
mean, I've been asking around when they think that it's gonna come out, and no one seems to have a good idea of when they're actually gonna be rolled out. Because we had heard before this General Assembly, and obviously there was a lot of people who were like, please God, no, so.
Okay. Other topics.
Maybe a presentation on the Rappahannock Roundtable about what that brings.
Yep. Members do need to know what that is and what it does, what its role is. And just in case you hadn't picked up on the revised agenda I sent out this morning, which we changed our location for the commission meeting next week. We're at the regional airport in Stafford, but in the future meeting items, we're going to get a briefing on SWIFT at the September meeting. We will be at the Bliles Center in Westmoreland at the June meeting, and that gives us an opportunity, if the weather is good, to do some things that are where the land meets the water. And I'd like to have some discussions about living shorelines. And with that, one of the Renew commission members, Joshua Cole, reached out to me over the weekend about living shorelines. He's concerned that we don't have the vendors in the region to do the plant material work. And I said that there have been discussions on that going on for a while. And Brent, I know you guys have been involved in some discussions on that, but there've also been folks down, John, in your neck of the woods, Bateman, in your neck of the woods, that have had discussions on that.
So ODU has been carrying on a conversation, or they did a couple of things recently on supply chain issues for grasses that I saw about 3 or 4 months ago. I'll follow up with Delegate Cole on that.
That'd be great. Thank you. I'll let him know that to expect a call or a reach out.
There was a good presentation at the Go Virginia Region 6 on living shorelines, including a couple of vendors. But Louis Lawrence was he was also on the panel that day. This was back in February at Mary Washington Dahlgren campus. And there was a great panel, and I might recommend reaching out to Louis.
Well, I had mentioned to Joshua Cole that Middle Peninsula had done some work on that. So
yeah, Middle Peninsula's trying to sort of be at the forefront of it right now.
Okay. Who else was on that panel, Tommy? Do you remember?
I can look it up and I'll get back to you.
Eldon, it was the panel on the RISE challenge. So it was Troy and Louis, and then I believe some of the contractors that won the challenge. So Natrix and things like that.
Okay.
I think I have the names. I think I'll find the agenda.
That might be something good to replicate when we're there at the Bliles Center in June. Since I'm literally be sitting right overlooking, of course, it's
Mhm.
the wrong river, it's the Potomac, but that's a tributary of the Potomac, but that's okay, close enough. Hey, John Bateman, you got anybody on the Northern Neck side that's doing work there on living shorelines?
You mean like promoting living shorelines?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not that I know of currently. There's really nobody at the regional level that's really pushing it. I know our county is kind of at the forefront with public projects. We have a large beach restoration project going on at Windmill Point. And we plan on using it as a demonstration site of sorts for our residents. And then we have a couple of other public access projects that are going to have living shoreline kind of components to them, more of like a hybrid solution. But I haven't really dug into that. And it's right, Louis kind of is at the forefront of that. And I like him see it as an economic development tool to prop up the industries in the area. But I just haven't had a chance to turn my attention to that. I'm heavily focused on workforce at the moment.
Okay. Brent, you get your hand up.
Yeah, so if we're talking about living shorelines in general, FOR received the RAF grant last year to overhaul our website for living shorelines. We finished that. We also have, we're working on outreach with the Northern Neck PDC to do living shoreline outreach to the public on our new website, and it's going to be revamped again because actually what we did is we developed a Northern Neck specific website, and then we transferred that information over to the PDC for their website, and then we're going to make ours watershed wide. But what it does is it includes all the permits, how you go about it, includes kind of a comprehensive amount of information about where to go to find money, who your contacts are in your counties, et cetera, et cetera. We are going to be conducting more outreach specifically for living shorelines coming up. Delegate, the new delegate for the Northern,
Kent.
What's that?
Hillary Kent.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
All right.
She is very interested in living shorelines.
Okay, good to know.
So regarding plants, Ranson's Nursery has become kind of the Virginia. They formed a partnership with Environmental Concern, who's out of the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So they are selling plugs from Environmental Concern now. That because we were trying to get Environmental Concern to come to and be their own, but they decided not to actually start another subsidiary down here. They're working with Ranson's. One of the drawbacks to it was, to be honest, the prices were a little prohibitive, at least last year. So
Ranson's Nursery, what's any connection to the former delegate?
I probably somewhere in the family, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
The other thing is FOR is applying for a NIFWF small watershed grant to conduct, we're calling it the Rappahannock Living Shoreline and Resiliency Fund. Basically, it's going to do a few things. If funded, it would create a cost share program in the Rappahannock, Northern Neck, and Middle Peninsula regions to pay certain percentages of living shoreline projects. It would try and bring the living shoreline CBLP training to the Northern Neck and to the Middle Peninsula for local workforce development. And also, actually, John, hopefully you know this, it would fund the plants and the planting of the Windmill Point project as well. So we put a large chunk of money in there for Lancaster County as well.
That's fantastic. We really would love to engage with you on the CBLP front. I'm in the process of getting the high school more connected with the technical center, more connected with CBLP.
Okay, Meredith, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I apologize. I jumped in a little late here, so I maybe missed or I did miss the front end of this conversation. One of the things I wanted to say is for Delegate Cole, his district is mostly just Fredericksburg and the surrounding region, which is not as living shoreline eligible, to my understanding. Is that right? So is he talking basin wide? We need more approach to living
He
shorelines, or
he
is he talking about
just
his
said
district?
he just said the issue was raised to him.
Okay.
And he reached out to me because he figured that I might be able to help him find some answers.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of going back to the original point that I heard you say was topics. Are you talking about topics for the technical committee or for the?
Well, no, it was topics for the commission. What
Mhm.
dealing with is a commission that has between a third and a half new members,
Mhm.
some with no elected official experience, some with elected official experience not at all related to water.
Sure.
And the general query I put out there was what are some of the topics that we need to get before the commission to help those get up to speed, but at the same time recognizing the other half know this stuff.
Sure. So one of the things I would suggest, I mean, GWRC has two topics really right now that are priorities, I would say, in terms of environmental services. One of them is green infrastructure, and we're doing several things on that front. But I think we've maybe beat that horse to death a little bit in the RRBC world. Although maybe the new commissioners would be appreciative of hearing more about it. We are hosting a charrette on April 26th to talk about green infrastructure in PD 16. And then we are funding a bunch of green infrastructure projects through the Bay implementation money that they're getting through IIJA. But the other topic that I think would be more relevant and maybe even new to some commission members who've been on the commission is septic. I think it's an increasing issue in this region. We're talking about it at Environment Virginia. Me and Heather Strother from Friends Rappahannock, the York River Steward, we're going to talk about which septic in general, why it matters, why it's failing now, and then also the Mattaponi case study that we are currently funding. So one of the things I would recommend is not just talking about, what's happening in the world of why we're experiencing critical failure rates, but also what are the funding opportunities? And that way it kind of goes right back to Louis. He's got one way that has been very successful funding it. I would also recommend talking to other folks. I know Culpeper Soil and Water has done a really good job utilizing 319 funding. Hopefully this time next year, we'll have really successfully implemented our septic funding. We have about, if everything comes the way that we think, almost $1 million worth of septic funding that will be rolling out over the next 2 years. And it should start July 1 this year. So I think that's been really top of mind for us. And we've gotten a lot of responses from folks already banging down my door asking, can you help this person? Can you help that person? There's just more people who need help than we have money for. And every time we bring it up, our board members light up of, I hear about this all the time. How can we talk more about this? So I think it's definitely something that addresses the water quality side of things as well as human health and fisheries. And, it kind of ties the loop on all these issues.
Yeah, to back Meredith up here, the connection to water quality and impairments on local waterways and how that impacts commercial fishing is really important to us at least. So, and would love to have access to 319 funding.
Oh, all right. Okay, a lot of good suggestions. And Tommy, thank you for the slides. Oh, go ahead, Harrison. You got your hand up.
I was just gonna say, to build off on that, maybe talking about the nutrient credit system that we have here in Virginia and just all those aspects. I know that's one thing that we've been looking here a little bit in Culpeper regards to how a lot of these major developments are been using nutrient credits to kind of offset some of their programs and maybe trying to incentivize them to maybe not try to use the nutrient credits and whatnot, all that fun stuff.
Okay, go ahead, Brent.
Speaking of the kind of nutrient credits or the, I guess, private markets for carbon, we are beginning to see the market for oyster carbon coming in into the Rappahannock watershed, and it not. I think maybe having maybe a company who is more familiar with this stuff come in and do a presentation about this, because it is somewhat new. And for a while we've had some initiatives that have been really community-based initiatives to restore oysters, and with kind of private equity and other things coming in, it's just a different model. And I think we could all benefit from learning more about this market so we understand it more, because it is a change as to how we've done restoration in the past. Not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's we really need to understand how it works.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and I'm not familiar with that. So we'd all be learning. Okay, a lot of great suggestions. I'm going to circle back to an earlier part of the discussion, but let's see, Brent and Tommy and Meredith, I'm gonna do some emailing between us on a living, and John Bateman on a living shoreline presentation. I think that would be worthwhile to plan for the June meeting, given the location.
I think Lowry Pemberton would be really good to maybe do that presentation, as she's the Northern Neck Soil and Water VCAP coordinator and knows living shorelines and the cost share funding through and through,
Yeah, I second that.
if she's
Sounds good.
available.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. All right, let's circle back to data centers and solar and housing, because I'm going to put them all together, because I want to put them in the context of what I saw happen at this session of the General Assembly. Thank you, Harrison. The three topics were not all interrelated, but they were hot. Bills were by and large carried over or killed, that would have limited local authority, and some of them pretty drastic, such as putting State Corporation Commission in charge of making land use decisions relative to solar. I met with the patrons after the bills were carried over, or two of them, Delegate Sullivan and Delegate Sullivan's bill and Senator Deed's bills were identical. I met with Delegate Sullivan, and I met with Senator Van Valkenburg, whose bill took a very different approach. And they are determined to deal with an issue that they consider to be, and this is my explanation of what they said to me, localities standing in the way of the state being able to meet its renewable energy goals. And I shared with them our report, and had some pretty frank discussions with them. And I talked about how removing decisions from the local level is removing citizen access to the process. And that's something that needs to be very seriously considered before the General Assembly goes that route. They recognize it. They were certainly willing to talk with me. I'm going to be having more conversations with them. But the reality of that, and I'm going to get to housing in a minute because it's similar. The reality of that is the General Assembly, there are members of the General Assembly and it's the members that are associated with the majority that feel very strongly that and this is a generalization, and I said it to them, that localities are standing in the way of the state being able to meet its Virginia Clean Economy Act goals. I'll get you in just a second, John. I just want to provide a little context from some very real conversations. Working with Joe Lurch at VACO, we provided information on, wait a minute, there are a whole lot of projects all across the state in the pipeline, and it's not all local government. That's just what you're hearing. Now, I've been around local government in Virginia long enough to know there are some local governments who can easily be viewed as obstructionist. And okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that statewide policy to take away local authority is the best policy shift. All right, John, go ahead. I've monologued long enough on that topic. I do want to get to housing, and I want to tie back to that data centers.
Yeah, Harrison might be hitting on it, but I mean, what about the role that transmission capacity plays in all this? You know,
yeah,
Dominion Power is not exactly forthcoming about its realistically how much capacity it has, and that's what our county wants to know. Like, how much capacity? Like, where does it all end on the transmission side? What's the be all end all there?
And unfortunately, Missy Neff left us because I wish we'd gotten to the question sooner, but I didn't know she was going to have to bail.
I can take a spin at that.
Go right ahead, please. And let me just make this very clear. I don't see this as an adversarial discussion.
Oh no, totally.
These are issues that have to be dealt with, and sometimes the General Assembly gets impatient and they take a meat axe to things, and it's not necessarily, and I can say that because I've been doing it 30 years and I've watched some of the meat axe policy changes. And this was done to proffers a few years back, and it caused proffer related projects to not get approved. It had the exact opposite result of what was intended, and they had to come back and fix it, because what it caused localities to do is say, okay, fine, no. And because the proffer system had developed over 30 years as a way to get to yes, and when they put in those strict limitations, it put up a roadblock to getting the yes. And so what did you get to? Was a no. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. That's my soapbox.
Yeah, totally. And for the record, we did not support any of the legislation that was advanced. If anything, we think the narrowness of relevant legislation would be a ban on explicit bans, but we're actually working with staff in one of the counties to look at the carrying capacity on the lines, and then looking at updating the zoning ordinance to put a limitation on the amount of solar in the locality by the zoning ordinance, 1%, 2%, something like that, where you reconcile the carrying capacity of the lines, and then you say, right now in this snapshot of the carrying capacity of the lines, you can't add more than this many megawatts, and this many megawatts translates to this many acres. And because the carrying capacity of the lines can be dynamic over time as they're reconductored, we think it's prudent to consider policy at the locality level that says we want to limit solar installations to this percentage of the land or this percentage of the ag land in the county.
And under one of those bills, that absolutely would be forbidden.
Right. Yeah. Right. But I think it was 697. Yeah. We're members of the trade associations that advance that. And internally, we were advocating against that, because we actually think that a real surgical approach of looking at the carrying capacity and then advancing policy that aligns with the carrying capacity, to be mindful of the fact that it's very reasonable that folks are concerned about solar sprawl and data center sprawl, that you should put local policies in place to address the interest of managed growth and all that. One of the limitations with solar is the fact that it's not energy dense relative to gas, nuclear, coal, et cetera. So the footprint that you need is larger than you would need for other generating sources. And as you look at this very, very critically from a societal perspective, we need more electrons on the system because of 4 drivers: data centers and AI, the re-onshoring of US manufacturing, which is supported by both political parties. The world of globalization is sort of over. Both political parties, both candidates in both parties support re-onshoring. A portion of the vehicles transitioning from gasoline to electricity, and then the fourth being more extreme peaks on cold winter mornings and hot summer afternoons. All of that, and there's been a decent amount of coverage, has shown that we need more electrons on the system over the years ahead. And solar and storage alone are not going to get it done. And each different source of power generation has its limitations and its benefits. Natural gas is dispatchable, it's low cost, but there's the environmental emissions of it. And as we become more concentrated in gas, we're more exposed to ratepayer cost being exposed to natural gas cost escalation as it's becoming a global commodity, whereas before it was a domestic commodity. But there's all these LNG terminals and we're exporting a lot of gas. Solar, while it doesn't have carbon emissions and it's fixed price, it has a very large land use impact. So while not directly responding to the question of when's it going to stop, we actually support very thoughtful county by county review of the injection capacity. And we support policies that put a cap, an acreage cap on solar, because we got to make sure this is done right. And then beyond that, 2 things that we're working on are multi-use to drive ecosystem services and drive compatibility with the local ag economy.
So agrivoltaics is what you're talking about there?
Yeah, agrovoltaics. And then the second thing, which is super, super interesting, is when you partner with a landowner, you either do a long-term lease because they want to keep the land in the family, or the family says, hey, you know, generationally, our kids moved to Richmond, our kids moved to Northern Virginia. We're no longer in the ag business and we're interested in selling the land. In that phenomenon, we are looking at putting a permanent open space conservation easement on the land, where at the end of the solar project's life, it will be permanently preserved or conserved for ag. So during the life of the solar project, it's solar, but then it will never be available for development. And we can do that on the parcels that we purchase, but we can't do it on the leased acreage. It's something that we believe, and the reason we participate in this forum is because we want to drag the rest of the industry towards being really good community partners, and we're sympathetic to the land use impacts. We're also doing a lot of work to look at the riparian buffers on the perimeter of the projects to see whether we can install tree tubes and actually have beneficial downstream water quality improvements by having really good perimeter control measures and then installation of tree tubes in the riparian buffers. So just to hear it, because I think that there's a little bit of a unfortunate phenomenon at the ledge and that some solar companies communicate, we're very mindful of the land use conflicts. We're very mindful of the fact that solar is not energy dense, and we're very mindful of the fact that this is pretty overwhelming when you look at the acreage. One last point to share. I think that it puts the Board of Supervisors in a really interesting and challenging position, because preserving open space often means that you're limiting development. And it means that you can put some strain on the budget of the localities. And we actually believe that if solar results in permanent preservation of the land, because we have the opportunity to buy the land, which is what we're doing on all of the parcels in our project in Fauquier County under development, and a portion of the project's parcels on our project in King George, you can actually have best-in-class development that addresses downstream watershed and provides ecosystem services, dual-use agrovoltaic, so you have a degree of harmony with the ag ecosystem because you actually have livestock grazing on site, and then a really unique profile where projects result in permanently preserved open space while also providing robust fiscal benefits to the locality via the increased assessed value of the real property, the rev share, and the voluntary payments. And this is probably new and folks are hearing it for the first time, and projects that have been permitted in the years past, you know, those may not have the opportunity for this, but you know, in Fauquier County, they're going to raise the taxes because of the desire to preserve open space. And that's a tough spot for the board members. And the question is there a way to preserve open space permanently, but then also support really thoughtful development? Because if you don't, the cost of living via the taxes and, you know, housing and things like that, it's going to put strain on the locals. So that's a long-winded way of saying that it's super multifaceted, but we believe that first mapping out the injection capacity and putting a countywide acreage cap is the right thing, and then having a policy preference for agrivoltaics, policy preference for ecosystem services, and a policy preference for permanent open space preservation on the projects are some of the tenets of good local engagement that's completely opposite of what, you know, some of the folks were advocating for at the ledge during session.
Okay. John had comments in the chat. You want to weigh in, John Bateman?
No, very refreshing to hear all of that. And Mike, maybe that has the benefit of improving how these things are cited, right? Like if you had a percentage cap, you know, it maybe those companies would be more deliberate in how they want to cite these things. And lest we forget about residential scale solar. That's all I had to say.
Harrison.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely very refreshing here. I'm just wondering, in regards to solar like utility scale solar developers and stuff, the flexibility or the potential of expanding beyond the traditional utility scale. And I apologize if this is a weird question or if this is something I'm infeasible and I just don't get it because I'm not, you know, a business person, whatnot, but trying to expand what typical utility solar providers portfolio is. So for example, you know, John Bateman just was putting in the chat stuff about, you know, brownfields, parking lots, VDOT right-of-ways and stuff. And I know, as you said, that, you know, solar is not energy dense at all. So even with a large utility aspect, you need a lot of land, and thus makes, you know, brownfields, parking lots, VDOT right-of-ways not really feasible for a utility scale developer. But is there a way to try to get that to work either through a huge network or through like just massive scale or stuff? I'm not even sure how to word this, and I do apologize. The caffeine is still hitting me, but a way to incentivize the more distributed or the more community scale aspects for utility scale developers so that we can actually use this land. Because currently with all this small level stuff, it's really either up to the locality or the individual landowner and whatnot. And I'm just trying to see is there a way to marry the two together?
Yeah. Well, I think that the unfortunate reality from a societal perspective is that we need all of the above. And each different type of project has different pros and cons. And the reason utility scale projects are often in the 100 megawatt range is they're tying into the bulk transmission system which requires a new ring bus substation, and that's about $10 million. And the rule of thumb is that in order for a project to be economically competitive, the interconnection upgrade needs to be around $100,000 per megawatt or less, which on a 100 megawatt project is a $10 million threshold. Those are sort of the economies of scale. When you go to smaller projects, oftentimes the ability to do front of the meter interconnection, you find sweet spots around 20 megawatts onto the medium voltage circuitry, which is 34.5 kilovolts. And then behind the meter, like on a school or whatnot, you'd be in the 1 megawatt range or thereabouts. The economic profile of rooftop, brownfield, marginal lands versus a 20 megawatt medium voltage versus a 100 megawatt utility scale are all different. And in order to meet the decarbonization goals and the desire to add electrons to the system and sort of the ratepayer impact, there's an interesting balance there where there was a very large surge of utility scale projects under development where what initiated it was the investment tax credit was extended in December of 2015. And there was a rush of development that kicked off in spring of 2016 in Virginia. And those projects went through the permitting phase in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. And then with the GTSA passing in 2018 and then the VCA in 2020, those were signals from the ledge to continue advancing utility scale development, because those were utility scale policies from the state ledge that created sort of a marketplace or a market opportunity. The vast majority of the projects that were initiated in 2016 through 2020 have gone through permitting or are going through permitting today, and there will be a notable slowdown of utility scale permitting from 2025 through 2030. And the reason for that is that there's not the injection capacity on the bulk transmission system. All the good sites have been taken. And while it's been a wave of development over the last 6 years, we actually forecast that it's going to slow down, because any new siting efforts on the utility scale side, you would propose a project at a location where the grid doesn't have any more injection capacity. All the sites have taken roughly around 2020, thereabouts. You could not find another clean site that doesn't trigger very expensive network upgrades. So can you find a way to compel development on brownfields, marginal lands, rooftop? Certainly, the ledge has the opportunity to do that. But what we're seeing at the local level on a land use side is a response to the unit economics of utility scale being more competitive than these other projects, and the signal from the General Assembly in 2018 and 2020. But I think that that will slow down in the second half of this decade. And perhaps there will be policy to support additions on brownfields, rooftops, carport canopy, et cetera. That will just have a larger ratepayer impact to add those projects, if that makes sense.
That's a lot to consider.
That
Yeah.
definitely clarifies some things and kind of confirms some things I was thinking, I was assuming. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'm going to say back to you in a different way what I heard you say, and tell me if I'm on track or I'm missing. So the marketplace and the infrastructure of our electric grid are going to slow the development of utility scale solar in the second half of this decade, no matter what the General Assembly does. I need to take you with
We're not going to meet our VCA goals. I can say that unequivocally. We're
and
not.
let me tell you what, those legislators that I talked to do not want to hear that. I
No,
mean, the pushback I got on that was huge. And it's troubling, because that sets the stage for some bad public policy. Intended to be good, but it's not going to be based on reality.
Yeah.
I need to take you with me to meet with a couple of legislators.
Yeah, I mean, so the physical constraints of the MVA rating, the ampacity of the overhead bulk transmission lines, and the amount of power that's flowing through them, you can only add so many electrons to a circuit before you have to build a bigger pipe. It's like a pipe with water flowing through it. That process, those costs are allocated to the projects. The new generator interconnection process puts those costs on the projects. So the second half of the decade, what you're going to see is the projects that overloaded the circuitry, that have the burden of upgrading the system, and the economics are going to be very challenged to make that pencil. What that means in terms of the VCA meeting the goals and the compliance and all of that, TBD. But what I do think is real is that there's a finite number of projects that can fit onto the grid today, and that localities should do that review of what project can fit onto the grid today, and then think about whether that translation of the megawatts to the number of acres is something that aligns on the policy goals, especially if you then toggle on agrivoltaics, permanent ag preservation, best-in-class stormwater erosion sediment control management, best-in-class riparian buffer, voluntary payments, yada, yada. And I think that if you go by locality, you'll see that there are very, very few localities that could host more than 2% of their ag land in solar today, based upon the transmission constraint.
So what resources would a Lancaster County or a Culpeper County need to be able to do that kind of assessment?
Yeah, the PJM interconnection queue is a public data set, and you can filter the projects under study in the queue based by county, and then you can look at the results of the projects that are under study and whether they trigger network upgrades or not. We were the greenfield developer on the Waller Solar project in Lancaster County that Liberty Algonquin currently owns. That project's 131 megawatts. It fits on the grid with no network upgrades. There's a Dominion project, Mary's Point, that's under development in Lancaster that I believe, when we were looking at this in 2021, was forecasted to trigger network upgrades and overload the system. And until the developer can respond to that question, it's very uncertain how a project will fit on the grid. And if it doesn't fit on the grid, then it's going to cost expensive network upgrades. And the question is, why are we having this conversation on land use if the economics of the project don't work? So we're happy to be a resource to support John if he wants to take a look at that, or others. It's all public. There's a lot of disparate pieces of the puzzle that we can help pull together for folks, and then try and have very well-educated conversations to support localities' review of the policy interest and goals, because we really believe that there's a very real physical constraint on the transmission system that translates to 1 percentage point of the ag land in the locality, 1.5%, no more than that. And that both from a policy perspective and a political perspective, if managed growth is an interest and you can do it right, well, maybe 1% of the ag land in a county is a reasonable amount of land use for solar if it's done properly. North of 5% is unreasonable, but 1%, maybe that hunts. And, you know, the mapping exercise can be done, especially if the development is done very thoughtfully. So happy to support the conversation however we can.
All right, other comments?
I put my email address in the chat, Mike, give me a shout.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do.
And remember that John Bateman's commission member is our current chairman. Now we'll probably transition to a new chairman next week, but Jason Bellows, who is not afraid to engage at a very high level, And his engagement, from my personal experience, is always very thoughtful. All right. So I'm sitting here looking back at our report as we're listening to this conversation, and I think it's time we're going to need to write another chapter. Um, and I'm just thinking about that very generally and in somewhat of a vague way, but some of what we just discussed here needs to be brought forward. And maybe that's some additional technical committee work over the next couple of months. And does anybody disagree with that? Okay, I'm gonna, and I may be reaching out to some of you. I'm going to think about how to pose that to the commission next week amongst everything else that's going to be going on, and at least get their blessing that that's a good idea, that we try to take this one step farther. And that's and that's consistent with the action that the commission took when they accepted the report. If you remember, those who were there remember, there was a very deliberate discussion and the suggestion of the chairman, Jason Mellows, that we call this a draft report because there are emerging issues that we're going to want to add to this. And that's what we just spent the last half an hour, 45 minutes talking about. So, all right, I'm going to switch us just briefly to affordable housing. It's less of a land impact, but we have the exact same dynamics going on at the assembly. There were bills introduced that were some interesting ideas of faith-based housing, for example, that got referred over to the Housing Commission, and streamline approval process for churches that have excess land so they could put it into affordable housing projects. Interesting idea, needed to be fleshed out a little more, and hence why the two patrons both were anxious to have it sent to the Housing Commission. These are similar dynamics in terms of the push-pull that's going on, and localities need to take this seriously, because if they stonewall the General Assembly, I fear is going to make policy in Richmond that really should be made at the local level. I'm just going to say that so everybody heard me say it. We in the development land conversion discussion that we had at the beginning, housing development was listed as one of the items. But we need to have, we are way short of housing units in this state, and that's a reality. And to ignore that is not good public policy either. So what's the way we thread that needle? I look for, Meredith asked the question, were we talking about issues for the commission or for the technical committee? And I chuckled when she said that. The issue was for the commission, but if the commission takes something on, it's going to flow over to this group. and so it's both. So we may find ourselves there as well. All right. I haven't gone back to data centers. Go ahead, Meredith.
I was just going to say, Eldon, affordable housing is, like many places in the state, very, very relevant to us right now. Our agencies also has a program that is community health and housing, which includes our COC. And we hosted a very successful housing summit last October for the Fredericksburg area. I mean, it was widely attended. Our keynote speaker was Abigail Spanberger. We had people from all political parties. I think every single locality in our PDC had majority of their board there. It was quite an event. But one of the things that I feel on topic here is sometimes missing from these conversations is from the literature, just like a very large co-occurrence of urban heat island and affordable housing, right? How do we, when we are pushing affordable housing units, how do we actually accidentally create unattainable housing, right? Housing that people can't stay in because of stormwater issues, because of urban heat island. And I think the two get pitted against each other way too often. And one of the things that I brought up a few times at the Housing Summit and have brought up since is that if we are creating, pushing housing so rapidly that we are the thing we're sacrificing is the environmental regulations, the building codes that lead to that, which I've seen is happening right now, right? The building codes are dramatically being reduced. I believe it was the governor who asked that we reduce building codes by like 25%.
Yep.
Yeah, and most of what was proposing to be cut was stormwater mitigation efforts and anything having to do with environmental regulation, especially as it related to things that would support CRS credits. I know that Wetlands Watch got involved in that. I just think that there's an element to this that when you pit the two against each other, everyone loses. No one wins in that situation. You might create building units that stand for a year, but especially in coastal communities, which I know John and I and Brent are all very invested in, you need to build for the future conditions, and those future conditions actually require us to get more stringent and not less. That's my soapbox. Sorry.
No, great point. That doesn't change the fact that we got to do both. And
Definitely agreed.
Let's face it, community development or anything related to planning is all about trade-offs, and you just gotta minimize the negative parts of the trade-offs as you try to accomplish multiple, sometimes disparate goals. I haven't gone back to data centers. And I don't even know where to start. I'm going to summarize what we've talked about so far, because we've had some good discussion. Issues that the commission needs to be apprised of include utility scale solar, data centers, tree canopy, impact on ag and forestry of land conversion, including conversion by traditional housing development, and that would also include commercial and industrial, although they're different. There's additional guidance that's needed for localities. And we really had a great discussion when Mike was talking about what he was talking about, and how localities can understand those infrastructure limits and use that as a planning tool. We know the 206 report is coming out, and we're going to have to figure out who in the world is going to be able to explain that effectively. Septic, which the commission has delved into many times in the past, but it's been a few years, Meredith. And Delegate Hodges took a lot of work that had been done by the commission and others, and patroned a number of bills over the last several years. Carbon markets and nutrient credits, oysters, topic I love. I am going to be in touch with several of you about a Living Shorelines presentation. I'm going to have some discussions with some commission members about these different topics and see how we want to build them in to future agendas. I really would like to do a panel in this, and the recommendation of Lowry Pemberton, who I do not know, but need to get to know, and some panel members maybe in June on Living Shorelines. And Brent, you're going to reach out to Joshua Cole and for his specific question. Brent, if there is time at the end of next week's meeting, or better yet, why don't you say something about the Rappahannock Roundtable during public comment? And we can kind of tee that up for a future presentation. And how appropriate, Brent, is it for some of these issues to get discussed in that forum as well?
Say that again.
How appropriate, pardon my weak voice, how appropriate is it for some of these topics to get discussed in the Rappahannock Roundtable forum as well?
It's a roundtable is very advocacy based.
Okay.
Yeah, actually not at all.
Yeah, it's explicitly banned. But I will say that we are currently preparing for the Rappahannock Symposium in October and are currently teeing up speakers. So if the commission has thoughts of things that are really, really interesting that you would like as a speaker at the symposium, I'm sure Brian, me, or Maggie Bloomstrom would be really interested in hearing about it.
Okay. I appreciate that. Okay, I've got a lot of food for thought here on what to do going forward. And I really appreciate this because this is going to help. We've got a refresh is not the right term. It's just going to be a different commission from what we've used to, just because of different personalities, and want to make sure that we bring them meaningful information, and they can have the kind of policy discussions that the commission is known for having. So, Tommy, you got your hand up.
Just one thing. I may have missed it. Did we talk about the withdrawal of water from the Rappahannock
Not specifically, no.
And it came up at the December meeting, and you might want to circle back. There was an interesting meeting in Caroline.
I can provide a little bit more feedback now if you want on that.
Yeah, Brent would know about that. I attended the meeting, but just to refresh or update the commission on what's going on with that.
Yeah, so the process, the draft permit has actually not been out for public yet, but there was an email sent that I was included on between DEQ and Caroline that the draft permit has been issued for Caroline's consideration. They have to send the official form back to DEQ. That dropped on Friday. And then as soon as Caroline sends the form back, it will be posted to town hall for a 30-day comment period. So that's when everyone will be able to have their say on that issue.
Remind me the magnitude of that withdrawal.
Up to an average of 7.9 million gallons a day, up to 13.9 maximum a day. Pipe 30 some odd miles to the other side of the county. Interbasin transfer of water, not a single drop coming back to the Rappahannock.
Yeah, well, interbasin transfer, that horse is out of that barn a long time ago. So,
we shall see.
Yeah. That anyway. Virginia Beach took care of that decades ago. And small scale interbasin transfer goes on all the time. Rightly or wrongly, just reality. Yes, there was mention earlier, and I didn't mention it, that to revisit what's going to happen with the regional water supply planning. We heard from Weeden Clough and his team, and they were still waiting for the new regs to be finalized, and I think that's still the status. The administration hasn't taken final action. The governor's office hasn't taken final action in releasing it.
Summer is what I heard. It won't, like, summer is
it keeps getting later.
Yeah.
Last summer it was going to be fall.
Right.
And
I was told, although again, it's been moved a million times. I was told when they were here, Hannah and Whedon were here at our office not too long ago. They said within 6 months, and their 6 month point in date was like September 1st. So I at this point, it seems like Brent and I have the same news. We'll see when that becomes stale or pushed again.
and I'll just make this observation. Once this veto session occurs, this governor becomes a lame duck based on all history of Virginia governors. And you will start seeing cabinet appointees departing. And so you're going to have people that are deputies moved up and people that were advisors moved into deputy positions, and that's just the way the cycle works. We are now moving into what I was trained to call the B team, and that's all of us sitting on this call are the B team, because we're going to be here, Mr. Governor, when you're gone. And you know, we're fast moving into that stage, and that will also impact the timing of governor's office decision making on regulations. And that's just a reality. Good or bad or indifferent? No, none of those. It's just a reality. Virginia governors either come in because they've been in the legislature and they know that's what's going to happen, or if they've come from the outside, it's a real stark reality when it hits them in the face. So anyway, that's my Virginia civics lesson. All right, folks, this has been great. We're gonna have some notes coming out of this and people can react to, and some follow-up conversations. I really appreciate this freewheeling kind of discussion, and some things to talk over with commission members. We will meet again April 24th, probably a more specific agenda on that one, after we come out of the commission meeting and really get a feel for where these new members want things to go. Again, we're at Stafford Airport next Wednesday. Virtual options always available. So if somebody wants to participate and can't make it to Stafford, let me know. I'll send you the link probably Monday. We will be June 19th in Westmoreland County at the Blau Center, hosted by Longwood University. I'm going up there tomorrow to see it for the first time. I'm really excited. I've heard all sorts of great things, including you better have good directions because it takes an effort to get there from Montrose. Then we'll be up in the Upper Basin, Rappahannock County in September, and then back at Meadow Event Park in December. So another year, Rappahannock River Basin Commission. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate all your support.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Alden.
you.